New pack, new dupes. First up is Scyther. All three have the same HP and retreat. I feel like if it could use a colorless energy, the first one would be comfortably my favorite. The new one is probably the best, since both Scizor cards get damage bonuses for switching in, so Scyther being forced to switch out is almost certainly good in the long term. Here's Pineco. The new one is cheaper, but weaker. Being able to mark damage right away is potentially very useful long term, but the old one does the same damage in 2 turns that the new one does in 3, and both Fortress cards need 3 energy, so the old one is probably better. The new Phantom is colorless, so it potentially fits into either Psychic or Grass decks. The cheaper retreat cost is a bit enticing in a Psychic deck, and it has the highest HP of the Grass ones, however it's very weak. This one is your call. Our new Trevenant is Grass type, and flips until it gets Tails, doing 40 and getting 40 more per heads. This is on average as strong as the original Trevenant, yet it's cheaper and also has the potential to kill very high HP targets. It's probably the best of the 3, but probably not worth touching even alongside Will. Our newest Charmander has the most HP of the 4, which is enticing, but the first one's ability to knock out baby Pokemon in the early game means it has the most practical value. Needing to discard a fire energy to do it isn't even really a problem thanks to Flame Patch. When I originally saw the third Charmeleon, I was taken aback that it's probably the best middle evolution we've ever seen besides Magneton, and I thought they'd never make a Charmeleon that's even close to as good. But the newest Charmeleon just does exactly the same thing with a mildly different attack, so it's almost interchangeable. The third one has a slightly better matchup into Oricorio, I think, due to being able to 2-hit KO through Cape or 1 lucky Ice Pop use. But I think the scenarios where one is better than the other are about equally common, so you could absolutely go either way. The latest Ponyta burns the opponent. This does at worst the same damage as the OG, and potentially twice as much if they flip tails and don't switch, but notably it doesn't get a super effective bonus, which is quite good for fire since you hit both grass and metal types for weakness. Overall, it's probably the best even still. New Rapidash does 30 on its first hit and 60 on all subsequent hits, which is very consistent and reliable, and honestly pretty great as an early game card. Plus with Blaine, it hits 60 immediately or 90 on 1 energy, which are both amazing benchmarks. Of course, the middle one is stronger if you're lucky or playing Will, but the second energy is a pretty big downside since the main point of Rapidash is that it can get abrupt kills in the early game. I think this new one is probably genuinely playable against top meta decks, though something like Heatmore is going to be more useful most of the time, especially in a post-Megas metagame. The new Magmar also technically works with Blaine, though you'd never run that combo with this card. It's very mediocre, but notably colorless since it's intended to fit into a Fire Lightning deck with Electivire. If you're using that deck, this latest one is the best by far, but on a pure Fire deck, I think every other Magmar is better. As for the Magmortar, it's surprisingly mediocre. I think even if it didn't have the Electivire restriction, you probably wouldn't run this card. 70 plus 20 to the bench is reasonably powerful, but that energy requirement is too high, even for Stoke Magmar, which would be extremely unreliable anyway on a Fire Lightning deck. Both Fire-type Paldean Tauroses suffer from being basics with high energy requirements. The new one possibly works thanks to Charmeleon's ability, but you'd much rather put the energies onto an Entei. The only use case I can see for either of these is killing Oricorio, and I guess the first one is better there, but I'm sure Fire can do better. I've included the rest Slowpoke with the Water one, since it can also be used on Water decks, and thus it's competing with the new one. Water has good energy ramp, so I'd probably use the middle one just for the low retreat cost to X-speed my Manaphy or something, but the higher survivability on the other two is maybe worth considering. Speaking of Pokemon not worth considering, Lapras. All 3 need way too much energy to be useful, and all 3 are high retreat cost basics. You'd much rather have an Ice Cube, Pyukumuku, or Furfrou, even if you're just trying to have an early game wall. Don't touch these. Piplup now has an attacking card, which is almost certainly better than a healing one. Meanwhile, Prinplup's new card loses 10 HP but gets a coin flip to double the damage. It is also a huge improvement. I quite like the original Empoleon card with its high HP and benched attacking, but the damage is a bit too low to justify using it. The new card hits a massive 140 damage if you've got less HP than the target, which is fantastic for hitting EX cards and Megas, and it's probably legitimately viable on Manaphy decks. But it's an unreliable win con, and thus a shaky recipient of all the deck space and energy it needs. Our original Fianni puts the opponent to sleep, and the high energy cost for the damage combined with the low HP and inability to evolve means it doesn't really function well in the early game or the late game. The new Fianni is much better, working as an early game battery, but with more HP than Manaphy and Mantike, plus the ability to damage the target. It's leagues better than the original, but actually faces competition from the other water ramp cards I just mentioned. There's a time and a place for each. We now have 7 Pikachu cards, and there's no clean way to lay out that many on one slide, so I drew in a Pikachu to fill in the empty space. The new one actually has the highest HP of the 7, but loses damage. I think Thunder Jolt to knock out babies, or Spark to set up Cyrus are the best by far, but the extra HP does give you some safety in the early game, so this new one is worth considering. I said in the impressions video, but I think the only real reason to touch Raichu is to kill Oricorio in Alolan Raichu EX decks, and this new one is the best at that by far, thanks to its high damage and low investment. All 4 of these have radically different use cases though. The latest Electabuzz has decent HP and high damage for its energy cost, and it's a fantastic basic. None of them work consistently on Fire Lightning decks, which is a nuisance. I think the Thunder Spear one is probably my favorite personally, but you could make any of the 4 work to be honest. Both Electivire cards are surprisingly good, boasting high HP for stage 1s and very high damage potential, plus energy support from Volkner, allowing them to activate quickly. This new one is the star of the Magmortar deck, since 120 damage on 2 energies is utterly fantastic, but it's not good enough in and of itself to make the combo meta from what I've seen. I'm actually a big fan of the original, and I laddered ranked with it long ago, but I don't imagine it's viable now. We have two new Electrics, counting an unreleased promo. Both the new one and the promo one can knock out babies, and the promo is more consistent at it, so I think it'll be the best one once it drops. Drowsy's new card puts the opponent to sleep but loses HP and can't deal damage. I've seen this card used alongside Igglybuff in Darkrai decks, since it's a basic that inflicts sleep reliably, plus it adds basics, so you're less likely to be forced to lead Darkrai. And it's probably the better card of the two, if only for that use case. Hypno's new card also inflicts sleep, but deals damage, yet the high energy cost is very difficult to work with. The original sleep induction works from the bench and stacks if you have two of them, and honestly it's probably a better Darkrai teammate and card in general than the new one is. The original Mew is a very forgettable card. The new Mew uses random attacks from your opponent's remaining deck, and thus how good it is varies wildly based on what it's fighting. It also has very low HP, especially for an attack cost of 2 energies. Nevertheless, there might be some tech value for it in particular matchups, and it's almost certainly better than the original. The new Spoink attacks, while the old one was a battery. The original Grumpig needed 3 energies, while the new one only needs 1, so you'd probably use the old Spoink for the old Grumpig and the new Spoink for the new Grumpig. As for Grumpig, it deals 80 damage if the opponent has exactly 2, 4, or 6 cards in hand, while dealing 40 otherwise. 40 on 1 energy isn't even horrible, while there's potentially some synergy with cards like Nasty Notice or Mars to get your opponent to specifically 2 or 4. This card is probably already playable and could even become meta in future with the right support. Old Grumpig's high energy cost makes it worse in my mind, especially if you don't get the chance to charge it with Old Spoink. Same old with Diglett. The new one knocks out babies and that's valuable. The new Dugtrio has some decent damage and notably a free retreat cost, but its low HP really holds it back. The best Dugtrio is probably the middle one, but the deck construction to make its attack reliable is so limiting that I don't think it really works. If you're desperate to take out Oricorio, the new Hawlucha is a very good option, being a basic with 1 retreat and a colorless energy requirement that can one-tap it. Apart from its ability to beat Ori, it's not horrible but not especially notable. Of course the middle Hawlucha can knock out Ori through Cape, but it needs either will or good luck, so I think running the new one with Guzma would be more reliable, especially because Guzma is nice in any deck. Okay, I have a lot to say about Darkrai. It deals 20 damage between each turn to sleeping Pokemon, and the effect stacks with multiple Darkrai. This is some insane DPS in the early game, and has incredible synergy with Swablu, and even more so with Igglybuff. I've already lost a game on turn 1 because my opponent drew Igglybuff and double Darkrai against my 50 HP Eevee, and that's not even a ridiculously unlikely setup. And that's not all. If you're lucky with some sleep flips, it can also bring back a lost game itself. In one of my games, I had a Darkrai with a bench Darkrai 1v1 a Mega Charizard X, since I was dealing 120 damage per turn thanks to bad dreams, and my opponent only had a 1/2 chance to attack every turn and kept flipping tails. Being colorless also makes it work on any deck, just like Igglybuff does. Of course, this Darkrai's high retreat cost and expensive attack add a huge brick chance to your deck, plus it's hard to activate even in the late game since your energies are usually better elsewhere. But to me, this is one of the best cards of the whole expansion, and much better than the other Darkrais. I mean hell, it outclasses the first one almost completely, unless your opponent is an Arceus specifically. Here's Trubbish. The new one has a higher damage and retreat cost than the middle one. I'd run the first or last, but not the middle. As for Garbodor, it's a 2 energy attacker, and its high retreat cost if anything is an asset since you're an early game card and it gives you access to Heavy Helmet. And honestly, this Garbodor probably has legitimate synergy with Hydreigon. I mean, think about it, you're only 1 point if knocked out, and Hydreigon makes 2, so you still have room for a finisher. Hydreigon doesn't need energy investment, so you can afford to put energies onto this. And its high HP and Heavy Helmet damage reduction should give you time to draw out your deck, making Hydreigon more consistent. Genuinely, I think it sounds like a better ally than Mega Absol, which is an outright liability in the early game. The new Zorua is just a Zorua for gamblers. The new Zorua Arc is just a Dark-type Espeon. It's probably a legitimately decent card depending on what you're fighting, but it's hard to say whether it's better than the original or if either of them are worth running. Our new Ghastly is Dark-type and thus only works on Dark decks, but the Astonished Ghastly can also be used on Dark decks, so they are competing for the deck slot. Hand Disruption is kind of cool, but the chances it actually does something pretty useful are low. That being said, the damage is low too. You could go either way. The new Fortress is pretty interesting, but it doesn't look good. You probably knock yourself out and hit your whole bench, but also hit your opponent's whole bench. If you're fighting against a deck with a lot of babies or low HP cards for Lycia draws, this sounds workable, but still pretty suspect. For the record, you can't use Protective Poncho since it only protects you from your opponent's attacks, though Metal Core Barrier can be used on bench mons. I would never touch this over the original, but maybe it'll have some kind of support in the future. Somehow we have 4 Varooms counting an unreleased promo. The new one hits 40 for 2, while the promo poisons. Honestly, all 4 cards are similarly viable, though I guess I'd probably run the poisoning one. Reverum looks like a fantastic card that breathes a lot of new life into the metal type. It's only a stage 1, so it deploys quickly, and it gains its main utility as soon as it evolves, which is an ability that lets you freely switch metal types. And it even has good HP and decent damage, so it could be used to beat Oricorio in a pinch, especially because it can come in and leave the active spot for free. A lot of metal cards classically have Titanic retreat costs, so this lets you use such cards as Dialga, Orthworm, Melmetal, or Probopass much more easily. And it has terrific synergy with Scizor EX, which gets bonus damage every time it comes in, which can be done for free every single turn if you have 2 Reverooms on the field. This is another of the best cards in the new set in my eyes, and a huge asset to the metal type going forward. The new Dratini has the same average damage as the middle one, but can knock out babies if it's lucky, so it's probably better. You might still prefer to run the original just for the extra HP. The new Dragonair gives itself a water and lightning energy, which is fantastic for every version of Dragonite we have, but the fact that it's a stage 1 with relatively low HP does make it a little liable to being knocked out, especially compared to the others. I think it probably is the best of the 4 though. The new Dragonite has terrific HP and damage, and can be used alongside Big Air Balloon or Heavy Helmet, but discarding those energies is a huge liability, even considering Dragonair's attack. Almost everyone running Dragonite currently is using the original, which has higher total damage and more disruption chance thanks to hitting benched Pokemon. That being said, doing all of your damage to the active is often very useful. I think this card is playable, but not as good as the OG, which is much better for the new Dragonair. New Drotagon deals 40 damage on 2 energies, and locks switching. This is much better than the middle one, which is one of the worst cards in the whole game, but probably not as valuable as the original, which is just a stall card. I wouldn't touch any of these. Once again, we have the Attack Stampede from a Pokemon that doesn't weigh anything. Needing 2 energies is annoying, and I'd probably use the Sing Jigglypuff personally. The new Wigglytuff needs too much energy, and the middle one for being able to support your team is the best of the 3 by far. Our new Miltank does 10 plus 20 for each card on your opponent's bench. This can be good damage, but capping at only 70 isn't ideal, and god forbid your opponent plays around it and caps you at 10. Whitney is an awesome support card, but I'd much rather have it support the original Miltank, whose snowball potential makes it the only viable one of these to me. Okay, lightning round. The new Chatot is almost always going to be worse than Meowth. The new Minccino is fine, but lacks a good evolution, and the new Cinccino is outclassed by at least one card in every single type. Our last card is Furfrou. The new one has the same awesome ability as the first 3. The average damage is the same as the original, but you have a coin flip chance of hitting 60, which is a very nice benchmark. It's playable and genuinely probably decent, but the Tackle Furfrou should be the best just for being the lowest investment, giving you the most total time to put energy on your late game cards. That's the last of them. Thanks for watching.